So I started off in the Navy and was inspired by, I loved the sea and I loved engineering. So ever since a young age, I've always been very practical with my hands and loved building things. And so the thought of being able to go to sea and go to sea on submarines, particularly with all of the intricate engineering that entailed, that's what I knew I wanted to do from about the age of 14, I guess. So I spent 12 very happy years in the Navy doing a lot of work on, it was mainly operations, and that's really where I got my enthusiasm for operations. Further 15 years in BP, running operating sites, refineries, chemical plants, mainly chemical plants, but a little bit of work on refineries. And then, so quite a bit of time out of nuclear, did a little bit of work on renewable energy for a few years and did various things in education and various courses for entrepreneurs and things like that. And then I really got back into nuclear in 2010 when I joined Urenco, the uranium enrichment company, as the managing director there. And then from there to run Cavendish Nuclear in Babcock, and then lucky enough to get onto the executive committee of Babcock as the lead for both civil nuclear and defence nuclear. And that's where I am now. And I guess, I've been really lucky in the jobs I've had. What do I mean by that is I've loved every one. I wouldn't change anything of what I've done, because all of them have had operations and therefore engineering and technical content. And what makes them all very special is the number of people I've had the privilege of knowing, meeting and working with. And no matter where I've worked, it's always the people that have kind of left me with the overarching impression of what a great set of industries I've worked in and what a great set of jobs and I've been privileged to have. The things that last in my memory were the safety challenges that we had, and so I've been involved. I was a fatality investigator in BP, and fairly early in my kind of industrial career, I realised that safety was of massive importance to me. And when I'm not comfortable in jobs I've been doing, it's been down to the safety standards. So driving improvements in safety standards and getting organisations to understand that it's very, very rarely people who are at fault. It is normally systems, process or culture, systemic things. That's been a massive challenge. And the biggest challenge I think I've had in all of my career is how do you develop a culture in a way where people feel engaged in it and it's based in care. And as a result of that, they want to be part of it, as opposed to, we're going to do cultural change to you. So, as well as the multiple technical challenges I faced, the leadership challenges have been the biggest, and around how do you inspire, motivate an organization to want to change, to modernize, to be more efficient, but also to be much more caring at its kind of heart, and therefore ultimately much safer. So a huge number of challenges that I've faced, but I guess all of them have probably centered around leadership as being the kind of heart of it. And what's the solution? Well, it always tends to be having a great team of people around you. So I've always been fortunate enough to be able to get a group of people around me that I know, like, trust. And then once you've got that team, then really anything's possible. For me, it starts with care. And if you care about individuals, you care what they think and you care what they say, and no matter what their perspective or point of view is. And therefore inclusion for me is the key word, because inclusion is about listening to everybody's viewpoint and allowing them to experience being heard and allowing them to experience contributing to not just the debate but the business. In a traditional organisation like Devonport, which I chair the board at Devonport, we're still very much on an inclusion and diversity agenda, because the culture locally in Devonport is very white, it's very male orientated, it's still quite traditional, and the number of females we are bringing in now, particularly through our project management graduate scheme, is really starting to change the dynamic. But what it's also fleshing out is some of the traditional behaviors that everybody believed were okay, but are macho, a little bit sexist, and a little bit maybe lacking in inclusion. And therefore, for me, what's the punchline? The punchline is a more inclusive culture in business is absolutely the right way to run a business, because it makes it safer, more efficient, and more effective, because people are happier in work and people feel that they can contribute. And with the different contributions that people make, you end up with a higher quality output. So it's not a choice, it's an absolute must for me, and it's an area where we still have a huge amount of work to do, but it's something which is already paying dividends and will continue to do so. Firstly, through the work we did in Cavendish Nuclear. So I'm privileged to work with a lady called Lindsay Valentine, and Lindsay worked for me for quite a while, and we together sort of formed a view of how we should set up a women's network. And then between Lindsay and her team, they formulated a couple of goals. And within 2 years, Lindsay'd been elected as the president of Women in Nuclear. And therefore, taking on the point I made earlier on about role modeling, that work she's done has been really, really important. And of course, Women in Nuclear then play a big role in terms of promoting that nuclear as a profession for females in education. We have very extensive programs more broadly in the STEM agenda. So every apprentice and every graduate that we bring in is a STEM ambassador, and therefore getting many people into getting our teams out there and into the community to promote science and engineering is a really important part of what Babcock does. And then the further we get into mature recruiting, we do blind CVs to kind of compensate for unconscious bias, and we are trying now, when we're outside, we're saying that we need, when we are recruiting from outside, we request that there is a 50-50 balance of female and male candidates for the roles that we recruit for. And the pure aim of that is to put the pressure onto the recruiters to look as hard as they possibly can to get as broad a spectrum of people that we can bring into the more senior roles. And of course, then we mentor our female leaders and our female fast track people, and people at all levels of the organisation, to provide them with the career paths that will allow them to achieve the more senior levels in the organisation. But for me, the most important thing out of all of this is giving the time to your female employees to get out there into schools, universities, to attract the talent into the organisation, so that we have a much broader population to allow us to develop, recruit and redress the balance of male and female employees. So yes, the straightforward answer is yes. Have we got enough at board level? No, absolutely not. So at a board level in the Exco of Babcock, and at the next layer down, the female positions tend to be in commercial or HR, which would be more the kind of the ground that would be is much easier to fill with females, because they are much better populated with a female population of very, very talented people. We've got fabulous engineers, female engineers in the company, but through our failings, we haven't developed them at the pace that they need to be developed. So we, getting the right number of people available to be able to be in the more senior positions, we haven't done as well as we should have in that. And that was true of a few of the industries. So there's a huge focus for us on firstly, the nuclear sector deal, which is all about getting 40% females into the totality of the nuclear sector by 2030, and that's very, very challenging. But all of that then starts to provide a group of people that can start to or be ready to take on the more senior leadership positions that they rightly deserve to be part of. And indeed, whenever I've been fortunate enough to have teams of, mixed teams, diverse teams, the quality of decision making, as everybody knows, is just far, far better. The quality of debate, quality of decision making, quality of teamwork, the whole thing is just, there is such a compelling business case that, it is a must do for me. It's a sad reality of the company that we don't attract that many female ethnic minority employees. A lot of that is to do with where we operate. Where we're really successful is in areas where there are larger populations of ethnic minority people, or a broader population of different ethnic backgrounds. And we're pretty successful in recruiting in. So if our Leicester office, for example, we've been pretty successful in bringing in a much better cultural balance. Whereas if you can contrast that to Devonport, the number of people of ethnic minorities, males and females, that we attract in tends to be a bit of a mirror of the culture or the ethnic mix that exists within the locality, and that's actually quite small in Plymouth. So again, it comes back to, I think, the same point that I do keep making, which is the more role models that we can get who are female and ethnic minority females, as well as white females. It doesn't really matter what the broader the base that we have of people that are going into schools, then the more chance we've got of attracting a much broader group of people. The final point I'd make on that is I don't see any unique challenges to promotion of ethnic minority females. I think it is part of the broader challenge of getting a large population of people into the organisation, so that you've got, firstly, a range of people who want to progress in different ways, but also you've got a rich talent pool from which to choose your more senior people. In my mind, people get the recognition that they absolutely deserve. Now, is that true for everywhere in the organisation? Well, highly likely not. So there are areas of the organisation that are more traditional, where our education is having to be much more intense. So where the levels of recognition are probably not what they should be. But I would like to think that in our professional community and in our project management community, the recognition is very high. What's really interesting, having spoken to a number of our female technicians, is they feel totally respected and valued by their team and their immediate line management. But when you go further out from their team, that's where they feel a little less valued. And that's something that we have to work on, further in the organisation. But the constant feedback I get is that we really feel valued by our team, and our team are very, very protective over us and provide us with a lot of support. There is an education process, of course. STEM as an education process is hugely important in terms of getting to not just the pupils, but the parents and the teachers to educate about the richness of the careers that you can get in science and engineering. And specifically what female engineers, and that's probably the part of the question I didn't answer very well in the previous question, is what females can bring to that. Is it, females do think differently. The DNA is different, and they, many females think in a different way, and you can tell that in the debates that we have at the board or in our management meetings, is when you've got a very mixed group. You have a much richer conversation because people come from different perspectives. Diversity comes in all shapes and forms, of course it does. But I find having females involved in a debate really changes the dynamic of the conversation that you have. So there's a compelling reason to have females in at all levels in the organization, and for the influencing of parents, teachers, young kids, and then all the way through primary school, comprehensive and into university. Role models are so massively important. So having someone like me talking to a group of kids in primary school or indeed students is of limited value, I think. I mean, I can kind of give them a little bit of interest, but it's kind of passing interest. If you can get a female that's done it and is closer to their, is more relatable, as not somebody who's their granddad, but more like a sister or a brother or a young mum or whatever it is, but someone they can relate to, then the power of that, I think, is enormous. And we have so many inspirational female leaders I've worked with over the years who are absolutely stunning at going into schools or colleges or primary schools and telling people about what they do in their career. And that, I think, is the most valuable thing that we can do. So, whether it's STEM or STEM returners, and whether it's young graduates or apprentices or more mature female leaders, having them out in the field talking to people in schools and and in colleges is, I think, probably one of the most important things that we can do, so that the young people making their decisions about careers, or mid-career people, can say, wow, okay, well, if they, she, he can do that, well, maybe I can. And I'd love to be what they are. Wouldn't that be great? So for me, that's really important. I think yes, it will, and I think it'll be positive, and here's why. The acceptance of a hybrid working style is now is with us and is with us to stay, and I think we all applaud that because we believe it to be the exactly the right thing to do. So the presenteeism and the need to spend time in the office has been much more balanced. So do I think you'll ever get to all home working? No, I absolutely don't. But I think what COVID has done, which has been really positive, is recognize that young parents, young mothers, or people caring for elderly parents, or whatever the pressures they have in their lives, have been much better balanced in some ways through COVID because of the recognition that people can work very effectively from home. Now, the counter to that, of course, is that it's put a lot of pressure, particularly on young families, from what we've seen, on their ability to do work and affect childcare at the same time. But I think the tolerance for having kids running around, I've been dreading it actually, because my grandkids are about to arrive, as to whether they were going to be trooping downstairs in the middle of this interview. But there's much more acceptance of that's just the way it is and it's okay. And I think there's, and the other side of that, of course, is that not only can you work at home, but you can also get the social value of going into work and being part of a team in work. So I would hope that in the medium term, that flexibility will attract more people into science and engineering, where traditionally people have said, well, you have to go into the office 5 days a week, because we've now blown that out of the water as a truth, because it's not. So my hope is, yes, if we use the hybrid working in the way I think it's possible to do, and we can use it as a recruitment tool, and we should, and we are going to actually. So my advice would be, come and test what a career in science and engineering is all about. So if you get the opportunity to attend either a presentation or a lesson that's been put on by or presentations, lessons, experiences that are put on by companies in your school or at a local event, come and see what what careers in science and engineering are about. And please take the time to do, work experience, or come and spend some time with us, during your degree or whatever it is. Come and do some internships, but come and try it out, because the level of flexibility that exists now within companies, the career progression that exists, and the pure job satisfaction from operating in teams and solving on a day-to-day basis some really exciting technical challenges, I think form a fabulous basis for a career. So come and give it a go, because we would welcome you with open arms, because we desperately need more talented people in our organizations.